You're tuned to 1520 WCHE Radio, and it's time now for the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will offer reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today. And now, Sam Hankin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Avid Reader. Today we're happy to have with us Laline Paull, author of The Bees, her first novel, which was published earlier this year by Echo, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. Laline studied English at Oxford, screenwriting in LA, and theater in London, all of which seem to be the right places for doing those things. Anyway, as I said, this is Laline's first novel, and I would have to call it a tour de force. I wasn't quite sure what tour de force meant.
No, I'm not either.
So I looked it up, and indeed it is, I thought. Here's the definition I was looking for. A particularly adroit maneuver or technique in handling a difficult situation, or a feat requiring unusual strength, skill, or ingenuity. The reason I say this is because the world that Laline creates is one in which you, almost immediately after a short prologue, suspend your disbelief for 300-odd pages and honestly believe in a bee, a woman if you will, Flora 717, as a heroine, as a fighter, and as a role model if you will. And she is a bee. Her world becomes our world as we are spirited away, as we are in so many other well-written books. So we're delighted to have Laline with us today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for asking me, Sam. It's a privilege.
Well, I just finished reading your book for the second time. And the reason being, well, first of all, I enjoyed it so much. The first time was when you sent me the ARC, the advanced reader copy. Mm-hmm. And then this time when I shouldn't say this since I own a bookstore, when I actually downloaded it in preparation for this interview. And I enjoyed it as much the second time around, which is saying a lot for an author.
Wow, that's great to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the thing about, this is off the topic, but the thing about the ARC that was interesting was the cover of your book is absolutely beautiful.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's superb. And I've said this many times on the show that you really shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but owning an independent bookstore, I realize that when people walk in, that's exactly what they do. And the fact that yours is embossed and the gold, and then when I got the ARC, I'm wondering, this Echo was really behind you because that covers cost a lot of money.
Yeah. I was shocked when I first saw it because I hadn't expected them to just come out punching so hard with it, aesthetically and visually. And I certainly didn't expect to see my name. I haven't got a copy in front of me, but I think it might even be in gold.
I know. And who gets that?
I thought, oh, no, that's far too prominent. I shouldn't have my name so big on it.
Well,
and I thought, and now, of course, I love it, and I'm wondering what on earth I was thinking, even having the slightest quibble. I think it's a fantastic cover.
Well, what I've learned over the years of doing this is I always ask the author, did you get a chance to vet the cover? Did you have final approval? And generally they don't. No. And I realize it's because the publishers know what they're doing.
Yes.
They know that if the cover doesn't work, they are not going to sell books. It's just as simple as that, which is a shame. But it happens to be true. So, like I said, I was and I assume, yes, you were very enthusiastic when you first saw it.
I was really stunned because it's when you write something, especially if it's your first book that's being published, in my case, you just haven't ever been through the experience of seeing and feeling it become a real thing, as opposed to just the thing in your head that you've been living and obsessing. So it was amazing, and I really didn't know what to make of it because it had such an impact on me, and that's of course exactly why they chose it, because it is a grabber.
Yeah, and the funny thing is I saw another alternative cover when I got the publicity handout, which was just basically...
Did you? Wow, I haven't.
it was just like a yellow cover with just a honeycomb, but in the most stylistic way, just hexagons. And I thought, one, people might not be attracted to this, and second, they might think it's a treatise on beekeeping.
Yes. I think that with the fantastic Echo cover, there is no doubt that you've got a drama on your hands.
Right. Yes.
There's a sense of threat about it and a protagonist, and all of which is true in the story.
Yeah, it's funny because your epigraph, which is by Carl von Frisch, who really was a biologist who studied bees intensely, if it was a cover of like one of his texts, I'm afraid you wouldn't see the reception that you're going to see with this book.
That's right.
And so since we've talked about the cover, I'm always interested in epigraphs because in many cases they are kind of a gnomon for the entire book. And here, what Karl von Frisch writes, and he knew a lot about bees, is the bee's life is like a magic well. The more you draw from it, the more it fills with water, which is kind of odd because you think of it in terms of other creatures, and what he's saying, I don't know what he's saying other than the fact that the more you learn about the behavior of bees, and he was essentially the discoverer of the bee dance, the waggle dance. The more you learn about them, the more there is to learn. Is that kind of what you took away from it?
Yes, and a lot of biologists who helped me referred to that very quote. And one of the things I found incredibly encouraging in my research period was that there were some fascinating facts. For instance, that the queen makes, it's called Q10, or it's called Q substance or queen substance, and it's got a very long chemical name I can't remember. But they don't know exactly how it works, and they don't know exactly what certain glands do in a bee's body. So there is still much mystery to biologists, and that was a wonderful liberty of space, imaginative space for me to play with.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because even if your cover did beckon people based on their idea about bees, bees happen to be, unfortunately, very popular and a hot topic now because of their increasing disappearance. And you've talked about that in interviews and about pesticides and things like that. Did you ever get to the point where you actually did invest, as you suggested, in a beehive and start becoming...
I really want to, and I'm also so respectful of the power of the colony. And also where I live, I'm not sure it's an ideal location because I've got a lovely, quite big garden with my shed right at the bottom, but there are neighbours around, so I think perhaps the next place I live will have some more space and I'll be able to have bees. I don't know though. I would love to do it, and I feel like I need to find out a lot more before I take that step.
Well, I inadvertently found out a lot about bees because I was going to interview Sue Monk Kidd.
Oh, wow.
On the 10th anniversary of The Secret Life of Bees.
Great title, isn't it? The best title.
So I got all these books about bees that I now have at my house, and they're fascinating. But then she backed out of the interview, although I just interviewed her on The Invention of Wings, her
which
latest.
I haven't read yet. It sounds amazing as well.
It is amazing. And the amazing thing about her is that, you know, she comes out with a book every 10 years or so, and they're all, you know, really, really good. But she was a pleasure to talk to, yes. And so going back to what we're trying to do is sell your book, so I tend to, you have to bring me back home because sometimes I just go off.
Oh, no, I'm happy to talk about good books.
Well, you know, and rather than me going through this, but you establish, let's talk about how you establish at the outset. I mean, at the very outset, Flora is essentially coming into the world through a struggle like all of us do. And tell us a little bit about the ranking, using the names that you chose to rank the bees in order of their not only importance, but in order of almost their royal hierarchy.
Yeah. I don't know. That was one of those sort of intuitive things that I had Flora as a sort of generic name, and I was thinking what plant am I going to use, what flower am I going to use, and I've got a very messy garden around my writing shed, and it's kept intentionally so, and I have these plans that I'm going to put this here and that there, and then I don't get to work on it as often as I should to make those plans happen, so other things happen. And so I was just wandering around looking at all the things, the mixture of herbs and weeds and roses, and thinking about the ones that had medicinal use and, you know, that have got a long tradition of herbal use. And sage seemed like a powerful name because it means wisdom, and it's also a strong plant and it has a strong smell, and I have this particular sagebush which is pretty indestructible, so I thought the ruling class would be sage. And then...
What about teasel?
Teasel. Well, teasels are very vigorous plants that grow a lot around me. I live on the south coast of England, and there's a lot of teasel in the marshes, and they grow on the beach. and they're rather beautiful, and they look rather beautiful when they get old as well. They have the big dried, prickly seed heads. And I just thought that worked well with sage. So it was quite an organic thing of balancing out the names against each other and the herbal and medicinal uses.
The interesting thing is, for our listeners, is that Flora is a sanitation worker. She's at the lowest caste, if you were talking about this in terms of India. And then Sage, the cool thing is that you imbue these characters, and you really do get lost in it. You don't even think about them being bees. But with Sage, you find this person, there you go, you find this bee who has these incredible qualities of rulership in the kindest way, but there's this undercurrent, like the iron hand in the velvet glove.
Yeah.
And then with Teasel, it's like, she's a little scattered. She is prickly, just as you said. She's very hardworking, but at the same time, just as everybody does. Why don't you tell us why everybody looks down at Flora?
Well, someone's got to do the dirty work. And you need more people doing the dirty work in life, as far as I can observe, than you need ruling and having the privileges. Otherwise, privileges don't really mean anything. Everyone makes a mess. Not everybody gets to have a luxurious life or people to clean up for them. And I thought, a sanitation worker is someone you'd rather not see because they're taking away your mess, and you might have ambivalent feelings about them, and you may not want to be too close to them in case you have to do their job. And so that became a natural strength for the story. If she's coming from this place, there's only one way to go. Well, actually, there's two. There's a miserable life and then a brutal death, or the trajectory of an underdog or an underbee who rises up and learns and becomes graced with language and knowledge, and ultimately, I don't want to spoil it myself. I don't want to put a spoiler in, but who progresses through the hive and transcends her origins, and that's an interesting story to me.
Yes, and that's what's interesting also. And the others have compared this to a cross. If some of them have gone a cross between Watership Down and the Hunger Games. I don't really look at it that way at all.
I've seen the Hunger Games and enjoyed it a lot, but I haven't read it, so I can't comment on that. But Watership Down is a very masculine world as well.
Yes, it is, and that's what's interesting about your heroine as well, is she's not this beautiful woman. God, I gotta stop doing that.
No, you're absolutely right. Within the terms of the story, you're right. She is a woman.
Yeah, she's not a beautiful bee, but that's unusual because in books that are very popular, the heroine, when there is a heroine, is imbued with some type of, very attractive qualities. And even though you see from the outset that she doesn't conform, which happens at the very beginning of the book, and she would be out of it, but for some interventions, why is it that you made her have these characteristics that were unattractive and constantly looked at as if she was inferior?
Well, that's probably a revealing thing.
Sorry.
About writing a character. I think I decided to really go for a character I could root for. And so I put a lot of myself into her. And I remember feeling really out of place when I was growing up. And I don't know whether writers feel like this, whether artists feel like this, but I certainly felt like I didn't fit in naturally, and that I was more of an onlooker or an outsider. And so I put that in. I just went very bravely to that feeling of being on the outside, and I wrote it from that place. And I think that's why the whole book works. And it was scary to do because it was very revealing. But I also believe that the best things are revealing. The person who writes the great song that makes you cry and you can't stop playing it, or there's Motown songs that have got a fantastic dance rhythm, but they're about something really tragic. And
of course, then you have like Adele, who goes.
Of course, Adele is the absolute apogee of that.
Yes.
We all, well, I don't know about you, but I absolutely love that song, and you feel it, and you believe that it is the truth that you are hearing and feeling, and it transmits, and it's that psychic emotional transmission from the person who made it to the person who feels it that makes something so alive. And that comes from a place of courage, I think, every time.
Well, she's a very courageous bee, and she learns. And I was wondering, in the apiary sense, are there bees that have qualities that are unexpected? For example, being able to generate the flow. Are there bees that aren't expected to be what they are, and then?
Well, you're talking about the real biology of
Yes.
the honeybee.
Yeah.
Well, with the caveat that I'm not an expert, what I found out was that some bees will do some jobs and others, which have identical morphology, won't. And biologists don't understand why that is, and that's a whole field of study. And some bees will produce royal jelly from the glands in their heads, which they can only do when they're young, and others won't, and they'll go straight to working with wax, or they'll do other things. So we, as a species of humans, don't understand why certain things happen or don't happen for honeybees. And to me, that just seemed an incredibly clear statement of culture in the hive. Some classes will do this work, some will do that work, and of course that's where the anthropomorphism kicks in, and the kinship groups. And I found out that whilst the queen is the mother of all, she may have mated with a number of drones, so there'll be multiple fathers. So you have this enormous semi-sisterhood, which most of the time works for the common good. But I was thinking about, again, it actually being real people in a real place. When the chips are down, you'll probably choose a full family member to do a certain thing or have a certain privilege, and your distant step sibling may get shunted off to do a less good job or have the slightly staler food.
Well, it's interesting when you're talking about the queen and mating, because even though the book is not a comedy, the portion of the book that you devote to the males is, I don't know if you're the equivalent of a misogynist, but...
Oh, no, I love the drones. I felt...
But they're so hilarious. It's like something out of Tristram Shandy.
Well, I'm glad it works. I very much enjoyed writing them. And, of course, they are slightly foppish and foolish and doomed, but they are also the reason that the species goes on. You only need a few of them, and only one of those few needs to actually do the job.
I love the scene where they first arrive and they want honey and they demand it, and the women bees, I keep saying women, they're shocked, but they're so attracted that they just can't refuse, and there is a certain kind of man that's like that. But
well, I know, and I've known a few as well.
I figured you did, because you got it down.
I got my back on some of them.
But then they get their comeuppance also.
Well, yes, I know, that was a pleasure to write. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that, but I'm glad you said it instead of me.
Well, if you're going to do something bad, enjoy it then, so sorry.
No, that was great. And they really didn't expect it. And they kept wondering, no, why are you doing this? And that there is a certain type of guy like that. And it takes a very courageous woman to be able to come around. But this is almost, in your book and in the real bee world, it's instinctual, it's hardwired, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. It really does happen. Not necessarily in the way that I write it, but the reality is that the drones do not survive the summer. And they do know, the reality is they do no work. They can't even feed themselves. They defecate inside the hive and just expect someone to clear it. Someone does clear it up for them.
Yeah, Flora.
Flora and her sisters. And then at the end, to save on winter food, bye.
Well, that goes again to it. And, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis always had, even though they were the best of friends, always had this argument, because C.S. Lewis was a Christian allegorist, or whatever you would call it. Mm-hmm. So his allegories, his Narnia stories, were a Christian allegory.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he wanted to convince Tolkien that The Lord of the Rings was an allegory in terms of, denigrating the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
And Tolkien said, no, I do not write allegories. And so they had this big fight because, you know, it's when I talk to authors and I talk to them about, is your book magical realism? And they all get really mad at me, or a lot of them get mad at me because they don't want to be buttonholed like that. And, and the thing about it is, I don't see this book as being an allegory. Do you?
No, it's not. It's not. I think that is what is fascinating about honeybees and the colony, and has fascinated people for centuries, because it refracts our own culture, but it is not a direct allegory of how humans live or an economy works. But there's enough, you know, you can think of almost any group of people and they could find a rallying cause in a beehive somewhere.
Well, you leave the work up to the reader is what's cool. I mean,
I much prefer to draw my own conclusions and have a writer lay out an intriguing premise for me, and I like to know what someone thinks, but I like room for my own thoughts too.
Yeah,
so I hope I've left that for the reader.
Yeah, and I think when an author does leave work for the reader, I think not only does the reader respect that, but it's more, not to get too spiritual, but it's more as if you hold the writer's soul in your hand when you're reading the book, because the two of you are communicating.
Yes, well, that is the great joy of reading, and the reason that certainly I have always wanted to write, because I used to feel that I was being carried. As a child, when I read, I felt I was being carried in the imagination of a friend who had made this wonderful object, which looked like paper between covers, but was this transportation. And that was the only club I ever wanted to be a member of. That.
Me too. And look, that's why I have a bookstore.
Yeah.
The thing about a bookstore, well, there's lots of things, and what you can't find on Amazon or on your Kindle is that when a kid, I mean, there was a child who came into my bookstore who was 12 years old, and he wanted to buy War and Peace. So how am I going to sell that to him? I have to give that book to him. You know.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, you can't sell that because he's.
Oh, that's great! You gave it to him.
I gave him that book, and I gave him another Tolstoy book.
Fantastic.
How can you not? I mean.
Well. Good for you, and he must have been thrilled.
He was
wonderful.
thrilled. And he was such a gentleman too, because he didn't want to take it. And I said, no, I mean, I think it's important that you do take this gift.
How fantastic. That's going to be a seminal moment in his life.
Exactly. And it gives me hope for the generation, because if you're 12 years old and you want to read War and Peace, then we do have hopes. You know.
I still haven't read it.
I should send you a copy then for free.
No. I've got a copy. I haven't read it yet. It's, I don't know. I'm going to have a really long holiday for that. No, I know it's fantastic. I fully believe it's fantastic, almost to the point of reviewing it and saying, this is a fantastic book, 5 stars, 10 stars. But
well, that's the problem. When my producer gives me books, I always want to review or talk to someone who's dead. I want to talk to Nikolai Gogol or Dostoevsky and Franz Kafka, but you know, I just can't do it. But the other thing about a bookstore that's cool is that the serendipity of it. On Amazon, they may give you recommendations, but when you go to a bookstore and you look for one particular book, you're also going to see the book on either side of it. And one of those books may change your life.
Yes.
And otherwise you would never find them. So that's the...
Oh, you know what? You've just reminded me of something. That exact thing happened to me. It was on a New Year's Day. It was when I lived in the States, and I wasn't having a very good New Year. And I went into a bookstore that was open, and I was casting around pretty miserably. And somehow, Man's Search for Meaning by... I'm going to have to think who this is by, came into my hand, and I'm going to Google it while I'm talking to you. And I opened it on the page that said, don't ask what the meaning of life is. The answer is how you live your own life. And that was that serendipity of an actual bookstore.
That's amazing how that happens. It's almost in the Jungian sense, you know?
Yes.
How you dream of a fish, and the next day, you know, you run into 6 different fish on the side of the road or in a culvert or something like that. And that happened to me the other day, actually.
Viktor Frankl, sorry.
Oh, Viktor Frankl, yeah. Yes. I think I was in a bad place when I first discovered him as well. Actually, I was in a bad physical place, which I don't want to go into.
No, so Viktor Frankl is our literary godfather. You know,
yes.
That's the wonderful thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, and the other thing is, don't punish yourself because you can't live in the moment all the time in the Buddhist sense. If you can live in the moment a couple of times a day, you're doing pretty well.
Oh, you're letting me off the hook about that. That's great.
We all want to do that, and especially
Yeah.
as I get older, it's like, I only have so many left. I should
Yeah.
live in them. It's hard to do. And going back, right? I'm doing it again. We need to sell your book.
Okay, yes. No more Viktor Frankl, no more Tolstoy,
Right.
no more Gogol.
Straight through. So another thing that other people have looked at in an allegorical sense is like, for example, and I have tons of them, but for example, the kindness.
Oh, yeah.
So the kindness is this way of disposing of a creature that is of no longer use, and it kind of reminds you of society in a sense. What I wanted to ask you was, there is the kindness, but then there's this police that's, well, actually in some ways it's a police state.
Yeah.
And there's this police that are brutal. So what's the difference between the kindness as opposed to taking a bee as soon as it arrives out of the, you know what I mean?
Well, I've always thought it's quite sinister when you hear people saying, "Oh, it would be a kindness to, do this," when they're going to do something really horrible, like tell someone something they don't want to know that they're in denial about, or having an animal put down. It would be a kindness to stop him suffering anymore, or about euthanasia. So it was this menacing euphemism, which I thought could be quite useful.
Yes, it's kind of like a slogan on one of the buildings in 1984.
Yeah, or when you hear people say, "I love him to bits," you know that there is a big butt coming, and the butt has got something pretty hard behind it. So,
Yeah, that's a great synchronicity. I was just saying that last night. I was sitting next to this girl at a bar, who I know, and and
Yeah.
although I do have a bit of a hangover this morning, and we were talking exactly about that, about especially women, because you do it in your book, so I can do it too. Especially
Yeah.
women who go, I really love her, but
Yeah,
she's such a
Yeah, get
bitch."
ready for a kicking.
And I was just saying exactly the same thing. I would say this to her. I would say this to her
if she
face.
was here, I would say it, but she's not, and you are, so let's discuss it.
And I really love her, but where does she get those clothes? And do you think she actually woke up this morning and said, "I think I'll wear this"?
Oh,
But I
you've
do
got to
really
stay
love
away
her.
from these people, Sam.
And the other thing that's interesting in the book is the concept of the myriad, whether it's crows or wasps or spiders or humans. What is it that we all are afraid of, and why the bees are wary of many different things?
Yeah,
And so are human beings. But
yeah, exactly. You've got it.
But what I think is what I admire about the books is you do not connect the two. And as I said, you let the reader decide what is it that we fear like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. I mean, some things are literal, like spiders I'm not great with. But they're the one animal that I didn't look up in detail when I was writing, because I felt like I know enough. I don't need any more detail. I've got my kind of primal atavistic revulsion, which I'm going to use. I didn't even think that consciously. I just knew that I could write spiders with a powerful dread.
Yeah, it's like the spider, her name is Shelob in either the
Yes.
Lord. Yeah,
Yes.
it's like
and
that spider.
I probably was just channeling Tolkien.
I didn't want to say that either. But the thing about spiders, and the way you portray both the spiders and the wasps, again, in a semi-comic fashion, is that they have these characteristics. They're really nasty, but at the same time, they will give you some information that could be valuable.
Yeah.
But they do it in a kind of very, very nasty way.
Yeah. Well, they are the horrible learning experiences that teach you things that you really wish you didn't have to have learnt. But yeah, I suppose maybe they are a metaphor for those terrible times in life where you have to just, grapple and battle and deal with terrifying things.
Yeah, especially in America when you're dealing with arch conservatives or anybody.
Are we allowed to talk like this?
Well, I talk. Yeah, I do it all the time because.
Oh, great.
But when you're dealing with fundamentalists in any sense, the main thing about the conversation, if you can, or the dialogue, if you can, is there's no listening involved.
Mm-hmm.
They hear the words, but they don't listen. So if you don't listen, you can't change or modify your opinion. And
yeah,
like
and some very intelligent people are like that, and that's really scary.
I know, because I have two really intelligent friends. One, Chris, is so intelligent that he learned Greek in order to read the Bible in Greek.
Oh,
which, you know, is quite a daunting task.
Wow, he must be very charming to still be a friend.
It's true. It's exactly true. Like, we had an argument in the parking lot of a gym one time, and I'm telling him, Chris, how can you be so intelligent and actually believe that the world was created 4,000 years ago and God planted the fossil as a test of our faith?
He doesn't.
He does.
He's a fundamentalist in that way, a creationist.
Yeah, but then I said to him, how can you be so intelligent? And his response was, Sam, how can you be so intelligent and not believe it? And that was the end of our argument.
Wow. Wow.
And then I'm going, well, you know, maybe he's right.
That's profound faith.
It is. And he wasn't being mean to me or nasty. He was just questioning.
Wow. I almost envy people that have that complete commitment to a religious belief like that.
Well, just think about it. If Jesus Christ is your personal savior, it's almost like having your own personal masseuse. I mean...
Are you not going to get into big trouble talking?
I don't care. I could care less. But it's just that, you know, if you had the steep faith, it makes life so much easier for you.
Yeah.
And you know, when ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. And yeah, I've always, in a sense, envied those who have this unmoving faith because their life is essentially set out for them.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I was trying to talk about in the story, in that sense of loss of faith that Flora 717 experiences, because all certainty and security are taken away and her world is destroyed by her own body. And if you love someone so much as every bee loves the queen, you've done something which is the ultimate betrayal and hate crime against the person you love. And what do you do? And I just kept thinking, if she has to really love the queen genuinely for the story to work.
But she violates every precept of the hive.
Yes, yes.
So what does that mean? Am I supposed to make an allegory out of that?
No, it's just what the laying workers, the 1 in 10,000 laying worker honeybee goes from being sterile to spontaneously forming an egg in her body. And she will carry on doing her duties in the hive, but she will also try and hide the egg. And this is documented. And sometimes she will start delaying laying the egg to give it every chance of survival, because if she can lay it at a stage where it's going to hatch very quickly, the window of avoiding detection is that much smaller. And if it can hatch out, there's a chance it will survive.
And Flora does go through, and there I go with the allegory. It's almost like a Herculean or a Christian type task. She goes through almost a martyrdom in protecting the egg, notwithstanding this agony that she's going through.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, you know, giving up your child to a torturous death to save the world. And I was thinking, well, a male god might do that. I'm not at all convinced a female god would do that.
No, it's interesting because it's almost like there's all these things I think about when I read your book, like Sophie's Choice. It's kind of like that, but it's and it's the concept of giving up something that's so precious to you, or giving up your own life. Well, you know, it's like we all like to think that if you were in the tube and you saw a child fall in and the train is coming, you like to think that what you would immediately do would be run, throw the child out of the way.
Yes.
But you really don't know what you would do.
No, you're absolutely right. We like to think that we would act heroically because that is who we are inside, and that's a very good idea for a story.
Will you attribute it? Will you dedicate it to me?
Absolutely. If I can, the short story is such a hard form, but that would be a brilliant short story.
It would be. The idea of
someone who doesn't do that.
And then how they have to live with themselves after. I read that there was a short story that I read where a man thought that his wife and daughter were dying in this fire in this house, and he wanted to jump into the fire to save them, but he just couldn't do it because he knew he would die. But then it turned out that he had been looking in a mirror in the house, and the flames he saw were simply the reflections of flame. So he could have actually gone in and not hurt himself at all, but what he was afraid of was just a reflection of what was there. It was a good book, a good story.
Who's that by?
I can't remember. It's
Okay,
it's a
so
science fiction story. It's like Robert Bloch or Ray Bradbury or
Right.
Robert Heinlein. I get them all confused now. Look, we're not talking about your book again.
No. Oops.
Okay, the other thing I really liked is when, and I don't know why she was given this privilege, but when Flora was given the privilege to hang out with the Queen for a while by herself, and everyone else gets, pissed off, but why is she given the privilege? And then the way you create the antechamber with the panels on the wall is just such a, as I said at the beginning, such a tour de force, and so difficult to do, it seems to me.
Yeah, it was. It was. I wrote this book in the shed that actually I can't see it because the vegetation has grown up in this great spring we've had, but I went down there very early in the morning and I sat there with the rain on the tin roof and I bit my nails and I ate too much chocolate and I just prayed, I suppose, that I could make this book work, because it was such a huge leap and there was no going back. And so there is a magic that happens when you just sit there with the intention of finding something, because a little bit comes and then you grab onto it and spin it, and just it's like something that you catch glimpses of, and you just sit there diligently making notes about that might work and that might work and that adheres to that, and okay, then it could be 6 panels because that's a hexagon, and then that could be the story, and there could be mysteries, and gradually somehow the concept forms on the page or the screen, and then you get excited and then there's a momentum, but God, it's frightening before that bit.
Do you really feel it as a fright, as a fear?
Oh yeah. I can't remember who says that anxiety is the handmaiden of creativity, but I think not really knowing where it comes from is something to respect and slightly fear, and something to have faith in as well.
I think in authors it's either anxiety or alcohol.
I've tried both, and it's a great combo. Not really. No, I think clarity is the writer's real friend, and a strong nerve.
Well, you are the only author I've seen who essentially acknowledges her shed.
Oh, really?
I think you acknowledge your shed in the acknowledgments.
Of my book?
Yeah.
Do I?
I think so.
It's on my website. It is
maybe. So, yes, on your website.
It's a thing of great beauty.
Yeah.
And the day it was finished, I rushed in there and started this book.
Oh, that's true. You have the picture of your husband.
Yeah,
finishing.
I'd been complaining to him that I didn't have a place to work in the house, and just because the house had rooms that I could use didn't make them the right room, because I could hear his voice when he was on the phone, or I would go to the loo or come down to the kitchen to get a cup of tea, and I would see something that I could procrastinate over, or usually the fridge, and there were just too many traps for me, and I needed something quite ascetic and Spartan.
What he created was a cell. He created a cell for you. That's like a honeycomb.
Yes, you're right. You're right. I hadn't seen it like that.
That's so funny. Yeah, my life is like that too. I make lists of lists. So
lists of lists.
Yeah.
To-do lists.
Yeah.
And undone lists.
Yeah.
And bucket lists.
Yes, I actually feel like, yes, bucket lists too. I actually feel like I'm accomplishing something as long as I'm writing what I have to do.
Well, that is true. That's a good feeling. You should keep doing it.
Well, people always have told me, Sam, you're halfway there. You recognize your problems. But then I've always been halfway there.
That's where you'll stay then.
Thanks a lot. That makes me feel great.
That's a good place.
Are you supposed to say, you're supposed to say, just do it. That's what you're supposed to say.
Oh, why? Are you going to write as well? Do you write?
I write, but all I can do is like exposition and narrative. I can't think of the story.
Ah, well, story. Story. But you can make a story.
I could do the room, I could do your paneled room, and I could I could tell what happened in each panel, but then I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to get out of the room.
You'd have to stay in your shed for longer. Then you'd be able to get out of the room.
Yeah, you have to work. You're a hard worker. You're a worker bee. You actually worked really hard to do this.
Yeah. You get a bit of inspiration, and then you absolutely put your foot flat on the gas and just go for it.
What about in the book how, which I know bees do, how flora is informed, literally, by other bees in the sense of touching antenna and knowledge passing from one to another, especially in one sense, in one situation where the knowledge that passes transcends death. You know, why is flora so in tune, like with the floor?
Yeah.
Floor, with the floor of the hive and being able to.
I suppose she's hypersensitive.
She is.
And again, I've maybe taken a trait that I've been criticized for and turned it into an asset for a character. That feeling of confusion that you can get from picking up on stuff. The floras might have that, which is why they are dulled, because it can be distressing to pick up on a lot of stuff. But for Flora, she can handle it. She thrives on it and thirsts for more stimulation and knowledge.
Yeah, and if you do talk about courage and your willingness to sacrifice, when she does what she does when the wasp attacks the hive, she's essentially the brave heart, you know.
Yeah.
She's the one who moves forward, but for her, who knows what would have happened.
Yes, she channels the hive mind. I don't think that's a spoiler to say. So she channels an ancient wisdom that they all share, but she is the one who channels it. So.
Well, that's what's interesting about the difference between the way humans live and bees live. I mean, it does happen in the sense of the cult of personality. It happened in World War II.
Yes, exactly.
Without
leadership.
And without those four people, who knows what would have happened to the world. I mean, if you're talking about Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt and Hitler, these are four people who essentially decided what was going to happen to the world during those 4 or 5 years.
Yes, but I'm also looking at a picture of Nelson Mandela on my mantelpiece, which was taken, it was from a newspaper when he came out, when he was released, and I just thought it was so fantastic because when I was a student he was in prison, and I remember fundraising discos and going on marches and doing it because it was the right thing and everyone was doing it, but never really believing that it was going to happen. Not disbelieving, but it was just the status quo was as it is. And then he got out, and then recently he died, and I dug out this old picture. And then the other night I watched the biopic about him. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't. I want to see it.
With Idris Elba.
Yeah. Which
was not a perfect film, but incredibly moving and so inspiring that having faith can change your world, other people's worlds. And Flora has faith in her love for her eggs. And I think as a mother, which I now am, that is just such an inspiring feeling because you don't question. There is one thing in life which you don't question, which is that you love your child, although sometimes you might wonder. Let me rephrase that. You know you love your child. Right. You may not always feel it.
It is unconditional. And when you talk about leaders who have changed the world, whether it's Gandhi or tragically Maya Angelou dying yesterday.
Oh, isn't she amazing? Wasn't she wonderful? Carry on, sorry. I was just thinking of seeing her on the news last night reading her poem, Rise.
Yeah, and it's if you want to achieve those kinds of goals in your life, and this is why it's almost impossible for me, you have to have an enormous amount of patience and the enormous ability to take abuse and violence without returning that in kind. And it's very hard. It's a hard road to decide to choose.
Yeah, or inspiring love and compassion.
So I have, it's springtime here, and my house, which was built in 1775, has one eave that's now infested with this hive.
Really?
Yeah, and I want to get rid of them, but since I read your book, I can't.
Is it honeybees?
it's honeybees, and they have the whole eave.
Wow.
But then
well, you could get them moved. You have a big garden.
Oh,
Sounds
yes,
like you do.
yes.
You could get a beekeeper to come and put them in a hive.
So you'd have a little smoke gun, and they'd all. How would he do it?
I'm not sure how they'd do it. But
I would have normally, had I not read your book, I would have eradicated them. Now I can't.
Oh no, because that's.
I know that's exactly what's happening. I understand. But
yeah, they just if you can give them a beekeeper who could find you the right spot in your garden, and you could have a colony of bees.
Yeah, I have plenty of room. I've always wanted to do
How
it.
exciting. No, do it. You can become a beekeeper like that.
All right. Well, okay, but you have to do it too. I mean, you're the one that's supposed to do it.
I know. I will. I'm looking at my garden now, and I'm thinking, I don't know where would be the right place. The actual optimum spot is right in front of my shed door, and I think for the bees that would work. For me, I'm not so sure.
Hey, where do you, excuse me, but where do you live in England? I don't even know.
I live just outside a town called Hastings on the south coast, so it's 60 miles due south of London, and it's the site of the Battle of Hastings, 1066, so it's where the Norman conquest began.
And the Magna Carta?
Was the Magna Carta down here? Oh dear.
I think it's
shaming me now, I'm not sure.
I think it's
How embarrassing.
The number just popped into me. Why is Flora 717? You must have thought of that number for a reason.
Yeah, well, I like the kind of syncopation of it.
Me too.
And it has a sort of, I was thinking numbers, and it just popped to mind, and then it had a kind of 007 feel to it. It had that, don't know, just once I thought of it, that was it.
And it's interesting too, like with the sages, and I'm not sure I was right or not, but it's as if they're interchangeable. You could be confronted, but
Yeah. That was a bit slippery for me to write, and then I thought, well, they are interchangeable. They are so identically, immaculately perfect that only the Queen is more perfect. And they share knowledge, and this is a world where identicality is the highest virtue.
It's funny because all of the creatures that enforce the rules of the hive, well, in case of the sages, they have this very angelic type demeanor, but as I said, underneath there's, and then of course the police are a mess, just like they are sometimes in America. But the Queen is just the Queen, and the love. Explain to our listeners what it is about the Queen's love and how it emanates and where it goes and how it's disseminated through the hive, and if it's really true.
It is really true. The queen bee has a unique scent, and it works on the whole colony like mood music. It keeps them calm, it keeps them productive, it keeps all their hormones stable. So the queen is like this wonderful source of Prozac, ecstasy, the perfect buzz after 2 martinis. Everything works beautifully, and it's linked directly to her fertility, and that's true too. So the queen is laying, she's producing this beautiful fragrance throughout the hive, and everything in the garden is lovely. The queen's fertility starts to decline, or she gets injured, and suddenly this beautiful mood music becomes discordant, and people start to stumble, and things go wrong, and suddenly this perfectly oiled machine starts to crunch its gears, and everyone gets worried. And I thought that was a wonderful responsibility for her to have, and how incredibly lonely that would be to be her, because she's not in control of it either.
No.
At least biologists don't think so. Otherwise, if the queen was in control of her fertility, it would never wane and she'd never be replaced.
Which is why I've always felt a great deal of sympathy and just perhaps empathy towards Queen Elizabeth.
Yes.
Because since 1951, she's been in a situation where it seems on the outside that it must be a lovely way to live, but then you realize, no, she has no freedom of sorts.
Well, I'm no monarchist, but I do admire the Queen Elizabeth. I think she's done an amazing tour of duty.
Yes. And she doesn't want to give it up either, though.
It doesn't seem to. She doesn't seem to want to, does she?
No. But I love the Queen Mother, which reminds me of your 2 martinis. But so are you? So I think you're the type of person you can drink 2 martinis, but if it's the third one is the one that kind of tips you over.
Oh, 2 is too many. 1 is not enough. 2 is too many. But there you go. So I don't drink them very often. Can't remember the last time.
All right. Well, let's end on the note of alcoholism and alcohol. Because we've been talking for 50 minutes.
Have we?
Yeah.
Have we really? Wow. Time for a cup of tea.
Yeah. Likewise. But unfortunately, I have to get mine at Starbucks. You can actually get a real cup of tea.
Oh, well, I'll send you some tea bags if you like.
Well, no, we actually, at the bookstore, we actually have excellent loose tea and all kinds of cakes and different coffees. So.
Oh, your bookstore looks great.
Oh, it is great. But the problem is with the espresso machine, when we first opened, I ended up having like 8 shots of espresso a day.
Oh,
it would have killed me eventually.
Yeah.
And I was so hyper. I was just flying all over the place.
2 before 2 p.m. and that's fine. Any more than that and it's chewing the furniture.
Well, do you stay up like really late at night reading?
It depends. Depends what's happening, whether it's the school holidays and the kids are around or quite often. When I'm not writing, I can do that. When I'm writing, I have to be very disciplined and go to bed early and get up really early. And at the moment, I'm not writing, so yeah.
But your books are the kind of books that irritate me because I'm reading it and, I can't stop. And then, I put the kids to bed and I'm thinking, okay, this is great. I'll read from 9 to 11 and I'll go to sleep because I have to get up early. And then I find myself at 2 o'clock in the morning and you've ruined my entire night.
Oh, fantastic. I'm thrilled that my book has irritated you for that reason. That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I get 3 hours of sleep. I'm probably going to lose a year of life because of you and other authors, Wow. I'm supposed to get 8 hours. I'm
going to look through all your podcasts after this and see if I can get irritated as well.
Oh, you will. You could, in terms of insomnia, you could listen to me speak for 140 hours. And as you've seen in this interview, I end up speaking as much as the author.
Oh, that's great. So are you going to edit it or do you just stick the whole thing up?
I'm too lazy to edit it.
Okay.
No, everything you said has been wonderful.
Okay. I doubt that, but thank you.
No, it has. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today.
Likewise.
Okay, well, so I know there's something in the works.
Yes.
Is it another... Is it another...
It's not a bequel. Sorry.
How many times have you said that?
Actually, this is the first time I've really come out with it. I've wanted to say it.
I'm glad it happened here first.
A lot of people have been sending me some truly bad bee puns, so, feel free.
Yeah, I know there are. I already thought of several of them.
Yeah, there's a very welcome home for them. Yeah.
Well, hopefully when you write your next, I'll get the ARC, and perhaps I can be the first to interview you when that one comes out. And if you ever come to the States, I would love to have you come to the store. I would love to come to your store. It sounds fantastic. I'll go on, a coffee jag with you. Okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Laline. Sam, really thank you. It's been my pleasure. Okay. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. So it's funny, whenever I interview British authors, I end up taking on a semi-British accent like Madonna does. But in any event, that was Laline, and she spoke so well about her book, which is really, like I said, it is a tour de force. It's Laline Paull, and it's Paull. And the book, The Bees, like I said, just came out in May. And Echo and Harper really got behind it, and like I said, the cover is just absolutely fantastic. So when you come in, it's on the front table. I would highly recommend it. And even if you decide not to support us and just download it, I would even suggest that. But it's different. And at first you go in and you go, well, this is kind of like a feel-good kind of interesting fantasy kind of thing, but it's not. You lose yourself so completely in it so quickly that you forget you're in a genre. And I don't even know if it is a genre. And that's why I called it a tour de force. So anyway, we're working assiduously on getting new authors. We've had a truckload of excellent authors over the past 2 months. And Rebecca Albright, who's our producer and who finds these people. And as I said, it's amazing that, I think I've said this on the show before, it's, that I get the Pulitzer Prize winners, 3 of the last 4, the Man Booker Award, the Orange Prize, even sometimes in these new, when I've interviewed children's authors, Caldecott winners, and it's obviously not me, but I do have this incredible repertoire. If you look on, like I said, if you look on iTunes, or if you look on our website, or if you look on our YouTube channel, you can go through each of these. And just as Laline was saying, she was, surprised at the pedigree of the authors that we've been able to interview. So am I. And I can't thank them all enough for being willing to give up their time to talk to us here on The Avid Reader. So, notwithstanding the fact that I can't tell you who it will be, next week's author will be another excellent one, because that's who Rebecca gets, and we'll be able to chat at length with him or her about her latest, about their latest work. So thanks as always for joining us here on The Avid Reader, and we look forward to talking with you next week.
You've been listening to The Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will be back next week with reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today.